Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the heavily concealed human infrastructure that's actually powering our most advanced technologies. We usually picture artificial intelligence as this pristine, seamless automation, right? Just self-learning algorithms doing their thing. But the reality? Well, it's actually far more human than you might think. So who is really training your AI? To shatter the illusion of a fully automated system, we have to look directly at a massive human workforce in the global south. You see, machine learning faces what experts call a looming data wall. Basically, without human validation, constant refinement, and strict quality assurance, the whole system just grinds to a halt. The magic of AI relies entirely on millions of hidden data workers. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the hidden AI workforce, precarity in digital sweatshops, the psychological toll, voices from the periphery, occupational health and support, and finally, fixing the supply chain. Section 1. The hidden AI workforce. Let's get right into it. There is just a staggering contrast between the trillion-dollar valuations of AI firms in the global north and the wildly undervalued human engine operating in regions like Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Tech giants routinely outsource their operations, stuff like annotating images, labeling text, transcribing audio, basically to take advantage of lower labor costs and weaker regulations. So the intellectual property, that stays in Silicon Valley. But the repetitive ghost work is offshored to a workforce estimated to be anywhere between 150 and 430 million people. Moving on to Section 2, precarity in digital sweatshops. $1.50. That's the hourly wage some Kenyan data workers receive to perform the exact same tasks that U.S. contractors get paid $15 an hour for. It is literally a digital supply chain built on extreme global labor arbitrage. And because they're hired through microcontracts or digital platforms, these independent contractors completely miss out on minimum wage guarantees, paid leave, sick days, the whole shebang. They are essentially treated as interchangeable computational resources. And it gets more intense. Workers are forced to maintain punishing accuracy rates of 98 to 99%, all under constant algorithmic surveillance. Imagine being in a digital sweatshop where every single keystroke is meticulously tracked. Any period of inactivity is automatically flagged, and falling behind? That means instant termination or heavy wage deductions. It totally strips workers of their autonomy, forcing them to prioritize speed over their own personal well-being. Which brings us to Section 3, the psychological toll. The cost here isn't just financial. Workers are experiencing visceral symptoms, things like PTSD, severe anxiety, and emotional blunting. And this is the direct result of spending 12-hour shifts reviewing the most graphic, violent, and abusive content on the internet. They're screening road accidents, self-harm, and severe abuse just to make sure it doesn't end up on your social media feeds. This continuous exposure creates deep secondary trauma. And to make matters worse, strict non-disclosure agreements usually trap them in silence. So they actually risk legal retaliation if they discuss their trauma with their own family or therapist. Unbelievable, right? Section 4. Voices from the periphery. Let's hear directly from the workers. In places like Kenya, a fragmented web of vendors allows parent companies to easily evade accountability. This was notoriously visible when 43 content moderators who were hired by a subcontracting firm called Sama were fired and blacklisted. Why? Simply for attempting to form a union. When there are multiple layers of subcontracting, identifying who is actually responsible for wages or grievances becomes incredibly difficult for the folks doing the heavy lifting. Over in the Philippines and Indonesia, this lack of protection is compounded by punitive metrics. As one participant noted, when governments prioritize AI expansion as an economic growth strategy, labor protections often get completely sidelined. In some of these setups, an entire group loses their days off if just one person misses an algorithmic target. It basically turns colleagues into enforcers. And while companies might provide generic wellness apps, workers report they are drastically unequipped to actually handle the severe psychological trauma they face every single day. Across India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, workers suffer from almost total legal invisibility. Because they're legally classified as independent contractors instead of direct employees, they bear absolutely all the risk. As the South Asian expert points out, gaps in employment classification and opaque arrangements have normalized a system where extreme precarity is simply built into the everyday functioning of data work. It's just accepted as normal. Section 5. Occupational health and support. So, how do we protect these workers from data-related trauma? The source material outlines some very concrete occupational health standards. First, organizations need to classify moderation tasks by risk level, enforcing hard caps and mandatory breaks to limit daily exposure. Second, they have to provide independent trauma specialists who are totally disconnected from company HR, so workers aren't terrified of being fired just for seeking help. And finally, workers exposed to toxic content absolutely must receive mandatory, non-discretionary hazard pay. To make these safety and health standards a reality, researchers argue that governments have to step up. They need to weave digital labor protections into enforceable regulatory mechanisms. The clear consensus from the data is that voluntary ethical guidelines, they just aren't cutting it anymore. International standards need to formally recognize data annotation and content moderation as high-risk, essential labor. Section 6. Fixing the supply chain. Let's zoom out a bit. A really crucial step in addressing these global policy gaps is forcing lead tech firms to be fully transparent about their entire data supply chains. Right now, tech giants frequently hide behind intermediary vendors to dodge liability. Frameworks like the EU's Platform Work Directive are starting to mandate transparency and human oversight of algorithmic management. But experts stress this needs to scale globally, ensuring lead firms are held directly accountable for the labor conditions across their entire ecosystem. So, will the future of AI be built on a foundation of hidden exploitation or an infrastructure of shared prosperity? The rapid progression of artificial intelligence currently rests heavily on the exploited labor of unseen workers. But it doesn't have to be this way. The next time you interact with an AI, maybe a chatbot or a recommendation algorithm, ask yourself, who bore the psychological cost of that convenience? Because until we truly value the human labor behind the machine, the intelligence of AI will remain fundamentally flawed. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you with a lot to think about regarding the invisible hands shaping our digital future.